Mugabe was one of Africa's most polarising figures, and reaction from political parties in South Africa has been of a mixed nature. Let's take a look.
As tributes and messages of condolences pour in for former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, various political parties have paid homage to the founding father of Zimbabwe. The ANC, which has a long history of fraternal relations with its Zimbabwean counterpart, ZANU-PF, described him as a liberation icon who dedicated his life to his people.
There is a lot to learn from President Mugabe. One who could learn that it is possible to run a country as African people. It is possible to facilitate social justice. It is possible to drive forward national unity. He himself had encouraged white people in his country to stay on and be part of the reconstruction and development of that country. So there is a lot to learn, and we believe that those who are remaining behind will also do their part to make sure that they work together to construct the Zimbabwe of their own desires.
Meanwhile, the EFF has described Mugabe as a martyr, saying they will not allow enemies to tell them how to remember him.
Let us celebrate him as a hero. Let us not allow the enemies of our revolution to tell us who Robert Mugabe was. Only us can tell them who Robert Mugabe was. And Robert Mugabe was a revolutionary fighter. Robert Mugabe was a hero. Robert Mugabe is a martyr. Robert Mugabe is a fearless fighter for the land of the people of Zimbabwe and the entire continent of Africa.
Although the DA recognized the role Mugabe played in liberating the people of Zimbabwe, they say it's important to have a fair reflection.
Equally so, it then became absolutely crucial that we recognize equally so that President Mugabe failed to build a capable state, failed to continue the project of liberation, and unlike President Mandela, failed to step down and uphold democracy. So in such a time as this, that we reflect on both, because it's important for the people of Africa to know that when we look at liberators, we also need to know that there must be life beyond liberators.
Alliance partner, the SACP, was also of the same view.
The Zimbabwean lesson should also be our own lesson. Why is it that some of our own comrades in South Africa fought such a heroic struggle against apartheid, but when they are in government, when they are in power, they actually take the country and hand it over to people through state capture? What happens? We are not saying individuals are not to blame, but what are these challenges that can actually turn heroes into villains? Like more or less it happened with a hero like Robert Mugabe.
While Cope says there are lessons that African leaders could learn from Mugabe's mistakes.
It is unfortunate that he have passed on now with a dark cloud hanging over his head. But we are saying that we hope that the leaders of Zimbabwe and of Africa must learn out of the mistakes that was done by Robert Mugabe.
Meanwhile, UDM leader Bantu Holomisa remembers Mugabe fondly, saying although he had his ups and downs, he led the liberation of the people of Zimbabwe from the front lines. The PAC says they will always be indebted to Mugabe and the people of Zimbabwe for the role they played in training the then PAC military wing, the Zanyan People's Army. Meanwhile, the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, Peter Groenewald, says Mugabe's reign had disastrous economic consequences for Zimbabwe, despite his freedom fighter status. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.